Good day, everyone. This is David Ellis on the IHN network. I'm representing Onexxa. Today, I am joined by a very special friend of mine. His name is Yeorgo. Yeorgo is a financial advisor. And for those of you who are going to be watching this broadcast, this is the kind of broadcast you want to watch to actually help your life and be better at what you do when it comes to your finances, when it comes to saving. Look, Yeorgo, introduce yourself because you have like more accolades than I could think of. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, David, for arranging this. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. My name is Yeorgo Traiforos. I've been in the financial industry for 26 years. Born and raised in Saskatchewan, so this is my home base, and I feel pretty comfortable being here. It's a long time to get to where I am because every day is learning. So accolades, I don't know about that. I think the accolades that I have are the successes that my clients experience.
Well, considering the amount of information you have in that head, which we are absolutely going to try to extract on this podcast, I think accolades is an appropriate term. Let me ask you a question. When most people think of wealth, when they see wealth management as an example, they generally think of wealth in terms of finances, but it's in the planning, isn't it?
It's absolutely in the planning. Yeah, nothing happens by accident. So people talk about luck, but really it's in the planning. So the earlier I get to a client, younger is always better because it gives me more time for the plan to work with less pain.
Okay. Yeah, this is something that is on the minds of a lot of people in Saskatchewan, and they usually start this planning when they get into their 40s and 50s. So younger is better. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. For someone who does not know anything about wealth management, where is the best place to start?
The best place would be talking to an advisor. An advisor is going to give you a much better start than trying to start on your own. These days, of course, there's lots of different ways of starting on your own, but an advisor is always going to give you a better overall perspective of what's going on rather than you just focusing on day to day. An advisor is going to always make sure to keep that long term in perspective and always have you marching towards that goal.
Okay, so when I first entered the world of work, I didn't know anything about anything. Okay, so I didn't even know what I should have been planning for. All right, so I hear my parents talking about retirement. I hear my uncles and aunts talking about investment. What exactly should someone who is young, who wants to actually plan for their future, who is conscientious? Because when you're young, you're not thinking about a lot of things that will happen in the future, right? You're sometimes living in the moment. That does not go for everybody, but for a lot of people, they live in the moment. So what are the things that they need to know in terms of today's world and today's market?
Great question, David. First of all, one of the most exciting things I do in my office is welcome young people into my office. And I'll say that have zero money to invest, zero plans to invest any money. So next week, for instance, next Wednesday, I'm meeting with a client. He's in university at the University of Regina. I've never met him before, but I'm good friends with his father, and he asked if he could just send his son in. And very loaded because the kid doesn't know what he's coming in for. So it's the perfect example. But to answer your question and really to elaborate on what it is that I do, there is no just general advice. So when an individual comes in, it's all about that individual and what's going on. So if they've been working, of course, they have some capital, right? So they're going to have something to potentially invest. But everybody in their 20s is usually busy living their lives, traveling, doing all those things. So it's a matter of talking to the individual and getting them into a comfort zone. So there's no right investment, there's no wrong investment. At the beginning, it's simply starting. And once they start seeing that they're gaining traction in their account, they start getting more excited and they start connecting the dots to, hey, I put in $500 2 years ago, and now I look at it and it's worth 650. Maybe it's worth 550. So they start to understand what it is that they want to get from that money. And for me, I need to understand what their goals and objectives are and what their risk tolerance is in far as do they want to be very conservative? Do they want to put some risk on it? And everything in between.
Okay. In this market, I suppose financial advising, like I'm a member of a bank, and my banking person says to me, "Oh, we should sit down and have a talk," and so on. And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're a bank." You know what I mean?
Yep.
Right? And so a lot of people don't know the differences between, like, let's say if a financial institution wants to give you financial advice and an independent advisor. Well, you're not necessarily independent, but you're independent in the sense that you are actually giving advice to the individual based on what they want. Because I think that in terms of seeking financial advice, the reason why I do have an issue and a trust issue with the banks, well, is because I know a little bit of business history as well, and I always know that there's a shared agenda in there. So explain to us the difference of why somebody would go to a bank as opposed to you, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Another great question. So, first of all, I think everywhere you go, the person is doing the best they can for you in the environment at which they're working at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, when I started in this industry, I was working with upwards of 5,000 clients were assigned to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no individual time. You just simply process one person after the next person after the next person. So if you book a client for a 30-minute meeting, you really have to get them out of there after about 20, 25 minutes, because you also have to then take notes. You have to return phone calls. You have to return emails. You have to do all that. So banks typically, again, I'm not saying bad things about banks, but banks typically are processing large numbers of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And the less personal, the better, because you're a client of the bank. And the bank doesn't want you to have a personal relationship necessarily with an individual advisor, because if that advisor leaves, they take the client. So it's about the bank. The next thing you need to know about banks is they're going to put you in a very plain Jane product. So it's going to be the least amount of risk for the client possible, because the bank doesn't want to have to deal with anything. They don't want a phone call to say, hey, my investment's doing XYZ. We're not expected to do ABC. So they just simply aren't prepared to work with individual clients one-on-one. So that was a big reason that I started my own practice. And now in my practice, less clients. That really, really helps. It's all about personal and individual time. So if a client either comes into the office or we set up a video call, there's no end time to the meeting. So I don't set up 30-minute or hour meetings. Mm-hmm. It's 2, 3, upwards of 6-hour meetings I've had with clients. We bring in lunch or we bring in dinner, and the conversation continues, because drilling down into what that client needs, focusing on education. I do run what I call a teaching practice. The more someone understands, the less they fear, the more they're willing to invest in something that's going to work for them.
Understood. Okay, so you've mentioned risk a couple of times in this interview. How does risk work in the financial industry?
Okay, there's 2 different things that we look at on this side of the equation. Mm-hmm. We look at risk tolerance and risk capacity. Mm-hmm. So if I'm investing money for a client, I have to take the lower of those 2 items. So risk tolerance is, okay, David, are you a conservative guy? Mm-hmm. Are you an aggressive guy? Are you somewhere in between? And that's, obviously there's more questions to it, but let's just take that as a simplistic overview. If you tell me you're a high risk guy, mm-hmm. But then I also have to establish your risk capacity. So your risk capacity has to do with how much risk can you afford to take. So mm-hmm. if you were older and you're close to retirement and you only have a fraction of what you need for retirement, and you have a whole bunch of debt, and your income is low, you don't have the option of having great risk. So your risk capacity is lower than possibly your risk tolerance, because we can't have your money exposed to too much risk. It goes down, it's catastrophic because you need it. Whereas somebody on the other side of the equation, if they have a lot of money, they have a high income, they have zero or very low debt, their risk capacity is going to be up here, and then we establish that risk tolerance. So those two things always play hand in hand. If sometimes they align and they're both the same, oftentimes they're not.
Understood. And so, what are the typical investments that are open to clients? And remember that we live in Saskatchewan, so we live in a pretty conservative community. And every time you step out there, everybody says, well, things are hard. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to invest in anything because there's a lot of risk involved. So what are the typical investments that a client can make?
A client can, and GICs are a big part of Saskatchewan investments. Banks really push them, but they've been something that's used across all of Saskatchewan. So whether it's in Regina, whether it's in Pilot Butte where I am, whether it's in Redvers, Saskatchewan, Prince Albert, we are a conservative province. So GICs, a guaranteed income certificate. You invest a set amount of money, and your money is locked in for a set period of time, typically 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, and you're given a set interest rate. So you're guaranteed that return. There's no risk on the principal, and you're guaranteed a return. The problem with them is that they are that interest rate is set to the interest rate, based on inflation within the country. So if you're investing in a GIC, you're typically only keeping up with inflation at the best. So I like to think of it as you're spinning your wheels, sitting there in the mud, doing absolutely nothing. Your $1,000 is maybe worth $1,020 or $1,040, but what you could buy last year with your $1,000 isn't worth the same this year. So GICs are an option. Typically, I don't recommend them to clients. Again, comes with some of that education. So GICs are an option. Mutual funds are another option. So mutual funds, and all sorts of different things behind them. You could have a bond-orientated mutual fund, and bonds work similar to GICs in that they're very conservative, but they do have a little bit of market risk. A bond is something that if you, again, give them $1,000 to invest in a bond, you're maybe going to get a bond yield of 4 to 6%. So it's typically going to give you a little bit of a better return. Most people have heard from movies or TV, junk bonds. Junk bonds will give you that 6 to 8 or maybe even 10 or 12% yield on them, but there's junk behind them. So there's a high risk that you lose your money on those too. The next thing would be stocks, and you can invest directly in stocks, or you can have a mutual fund that's more growth oriented and has a bunch of stocks within that portfolio, thereby mitigating your risk, just having more eggs in your basket rather than holding it. So bond funds or income funds or mutual funds, growth or equity funds, let's hold the stocks, or there's a mixture thereof, which would be balance funds, the 60-40 mix a lot of people have heard of. So there's different investments that are out there. And of course, again, it comes very individually. What works for somebody? What does someone risk capacity, risk tolerance allow them to invest in? What do they want to invest in?
Okay, guys who are watching this, I just want to say something to you. I'm very happy that Yeorgo took this interview. I asked him to come on this interview because there's a whole bunch of people out there who want what he just said, the education. And Yeorgo, I'm going to tell you that when I was in business school, okay, I did a postgraduate degree in business. And the module on finance would have had to be the most problematic module that I faced. So a lot of people who are just, I don't know, they studied liberal arts in university, okay? when they see the amount of figures, the amount of calculations and stuff, they get intimidated. And a lot of this investment construct, it intimidates people because of lack of knowledge, right? To be able to dumb down the concepts of finance in such a way that people can actually absorb, okay, I need to do this or I need to do that, is a very, very difficult thing. So, the ability to educate people and break it down into simple language. So, let's say I am someone who is a liberal arts graduate. I have started my business. My business will be, I don't know, pottery. Probably I'm selling pottery. I'm making a profit in my business because, well, this is Saskatchewan. I sell my pottery to people. People appreciate the fact that I'm a family owned business, assuming that my sister and my grandmother is into pottery as well. So I start making this income, and I'm getting profits from my business, and I want to invest. Then I go to typically it's a bank is where people meet the finance construct. I am handed a brochure. I open the brochure and I read a bunch of gobbledygook that I have no radar for at all, right? So what part of your job involves the dumbing down process of like what you're doing on this podcast, which is why I'm very happy that you're here, breaking it down for people in bite-sized pieces of information where people can actually access this information, because I noticed that you try to do this on your social media, which makes you the immediate candidate that I went to for this kind of interview. How do you break this down for people?
I would say, and I'll see if I can be humorous here for a second, but so many times people do come to me and how they find me are different ways. And that's one of the first things I hear is this language is too complicated. These concepts are more than I ever could understand in school. And it's a very common expression, but they say to me, it's all Greek to me. I don't understand it. Well, I have a Greek ancestry and I speak some Greek. So I say, well, don't worry, I can translate it. Right. So to be more serious, but also lighthearted, this is my office that I'm sitting in. And you have been here once before, David, or before. It's all about being comfortable. So there is a boardroom table there, but there's also couches and comfortable chairs. When clients come to me, the first thing that needs to happen is simply talking about anything. The more I get to know somebody, we can establish a mutual language. So my language, my first language, my native language is Canadian or English, but it doesn't mean that I can talk to somebody even that I went to school with, unless I establish that common language, right? So easiest way to say this is if you're a car guy and you like working on engines and you like working on cars, I'm going to start taking that finance language and I'm going to start translating it into what you can understand as cars. I have someone who likes to crochet and she crochets and she knits all the time. The more I talk to her, the more I understand how she sees things in terms of, well, I need to buy more yarn and I need to get more needles, and she understands her supply management. So I now take that language and I translate it into what I need to tell her. And it's about time. So the most valuable thing there is time. And I'm always willing to give clients more of that time. So the more I understand them, the more personal their life story is to me, the better I'm going to be doing at establishing that financial plan, but also being able to communicate to them is the number one thing that there is.
I would think for someone who is just starting off, and I'm just saying from the neophyte perspective, they're going to be extremely risk averse. They're going to say, I just want something that's sure that I don't have to think about too much. How do you determine, because I'm guessing the clients that want to get into junk bonds and the stock market, you need a certain amount of foundational knowledge to be able to go to a financial advisor and say, I would like to invest in the stock market. If you don't know anything about the stock market, I'll tell you the least watched segment on the news, and that's the financial news. And I say it's the least watched because that's a niche market that they have there. Okay, so I'm going to speak to the people with the niche ideas when they look on CNN or Bloomberg being the channel for that, and they see all the little graphs and all the little things, the little trailers. Speaking of which, I should probably put your information up on screen. The little trailers underneath the newscaster that's giving all the stock quotes. Okay, let's try the stock market for one. How does somebody make sense of all of this, or do you rely on the financial advisor to either teach you and educate you, or do you just go back to school and do an MBA or something?
I think our society evolved a number of years ago, so we are all a little bit more specialized in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my vocation, this is my passion, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm absolutely could give that advice to somebody and could start building that foundational knowledge. It's the same as if I need a plumber, I could watch a YouTube video and I could fumble my way through that repair and probably get the water flowing again, but maybe tomorrow I wake up to a basement full of water. And it's not going to be everybody, because some people are very skilled with their hands and very adept and very knowledgeable, and they can pick up that wrench and they could go to the Home Depot and they can get those parts and they can make it work. Whereas other people, they need a little bit of extra help. So I always say to my clients, and again, I don't have any hair; it's all gone. But I have some of my best clients happen to be.
I know what that's like. Yeah.
They are hairdressers, and they're very, very good at what they do. And they, I get that typical comment. Well, I'm sorry to ask this question. I feel stupid asking this question. I feel stupid asking this question. And I almost am insulted if I've been working with that client for a couple of years and they're still saying that to me and still apologizing for asking the question. Mm-hmm. We all want to feel valued, and we all want to have that relationship where we just have that two-way dialogue. So if a client comes in here and they have some foundational knowledge, mm-hmm. I need to have, again, go back to that initial conversation. I need to determine where they are on that knowledge scale. So if this is the knowledge scale and they're just starting out, mm-hmm. I need to understand that I'm going to take them over here. And then eventually we're going to go over here. But sometimes people come to my office and they're very close to that gap where they actually understand a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. But they still don't have the capacity in their lives to keep up with all the market news. They don't want to be monitoring all their stuff. As you get closer to retirement, sometimes people do start looking at it a little bit closer. But other times, or probably the majority, is you want to focus on your life. You want to focus on your reality and getting to your retirement and then enjoying retirement. You don't want to be in the weeds dealing with the day-to-day stuff. I will never hide the day-to-day stuff if somebody wants to know it. I'm all in. Let's talk about it. But sometimes people want a little bit more of the I can't quite see, all the time approach.
There is another thing that is a problem. A little bit of information can be a dangerous thing. I'll give you an example. You turn on the news and the news is telling you there's a war on in Iran and the stock market has crashed. People remember, the only thing that they remember is the stock market has crashed. So the doom and gloom philosophy tends to discourage people from investing, from seeking financial advice, and so on, because it puts them into a sort of financial survival mode. It puts them into a survival mode. And it's my understanding that when things are being put into this crunch, this is probably the time that you should probably consider safer options of investment. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of people out there who are going to be watching this broadcast and saying, financial advice, investment, what are they talking about? The world is going to hell in a handbasket. That's what the news tells me, right? There's a war on, gas prices are rising, right? The doom and gloom philosophy. How do you calm someone who comes into your office? Walk me through this. How do you calm someone who comes into your office and says, I want to invest, all right? I have $1,000, but I'm only going to invest like $100. Tell me.
So again, it's very important to meet everybody where they're at.
Uh-huh.
So there's certainly people that do watch the news and do, I'll say, subscribe more to the doom and gloom side, and
Mm-hmm.
then someone will watch the same news and they say, well, that's on the other part of the world, so that doesn't affect me. I'm not going to worry about it. So there's somewhere in between. And I have as much as I love technology, I'm also a paper guy, and I can't show it to you now. Well, it's actually back on the desk over there. There's a flip chart. You can see a pie graph in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about how to react when the markets go down. And I think the first thing that people need to understand is that absolutely over time, the markets have always been volatile. They go up and down. And now since the beginning of the markets, and going back to 1850s and even before that, over time, the markets have gone up. But in that time period, there's ups and downs and ups and downs. So the biggest thing to invest money is to separate emotions and fact and reality.
Mm-hmm.
So now when we look at what's going on Iran, there's war is never good. There's atrocities. There's bad things that are happening to individuals on the ground. All those things. So we never want to gloss over that. But to just talk about the sheer finances of it, it's definitely different than most people would think. So right now, because of Canada being a strong oil and gas nation, we have prosperity going on here for the most part. Not the individual going to the gas pump, but the oil and gas stocks are doing really well. So our TSX is actually done very well. The TSX being the main stock index in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's been doing exceptionally well since this war has happened. So tends to happen is there's one thing is being hurt and something else is doing really good. So I love managed money. I don't like individual investments. I think managed money is going to be better for most clients.
Mm-hmm.
The portfolio manager who manages that, or it's a team really, they're looking at that as an opportunity. Again, not to take away from the bad things that go on, but they're looking at it as an opportunity. So when this war starts, you look at it as, from a client standpoint, oh my goodness, the war just happened, or this war started, and now this is going to hurt my investments. But you need to understand the flip side of it is the portfolio manager, every day of the year, every day of the month, the decade, it doesn't matter. They are always prepared for pretty much every outcome. So they're not being reactive to just it being a war. They're looking at it very non-emotionally, and they're saying, okay, well, this is now going to increase Canadian and American oil and gas companies. That's going to really help that. But we know that out of that Strait of Hormuz, that oil is being hurt. So some of those foreign holdings, we got to maybe shed some of them, and we got to increase the Canadian and the U.S. oil and gas companies. So there's always a reaction, but the portfolio managers are prepared for it. And so the best example, I think, that's easiest for most people to understand is if we go back to 2020 and we look at COVID. So January 1st of 2020, the stock markets were very peaked. They were close to all-time highs. And as the news starts changing and we start talking about COVID and the way COVID affected the world, by March 30th, so in 3 short months, the global markets were down on average of 30%. And when you have that high emotion, and especially something like that black sheep event where no one's seen it before, right? In a modern history, we've never had a pandemic and a shutdown. What happens to the markets is everything just goes down. So people get fearful and they throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
Right? So just everything gets thrown out. The portfolio managers are sitting there in the background and they instantly know what takes a few of us on my side of the desk, a few more days, and then the public takes typically weeks and months, even longer. Is with COVID, very quickly we knew that any brick and mortar business was going to suffer.
Correct.
Anything that had a digital model and it had a digital marketplace like the Amazons of the world, like Zoom and those things, it just had to prosper. But for the first so many days of the market going down, people sold Amazon, they sold Shopify, they sold Zoom, they sold all of the things that were going to be good companies simply because emotions overtook. And I better get my money out now before it all goes down to zero. So understanding that portfolio managers and the people that invest the money, and me as the one giving the advice and putting people in the portfolios, that we're very even keeled and we're looking at it very, very non-emotionally. Not that there's not emotions involved, but when you're looking at a client's money, you're separating those emotions. You're stopping all of that. And that's the best value I could add to a client, is when a client calls me up March 20th of 2020 and says, I want to sell everything. I'm fearful. Education comes in. So having this conversation with them, showing them the metrics, showing them the slides, talking about how the portfolio managers are almost giddy because now that company they wanted to buy, but it was too overpriced. Now it's all of a sudden just dropped 30% because everything did. Now they can buy it. And when the markets go back up, which they inevitably do, the client's going to take full advantage of it. So emotions is a big thing. Money is a very emotional subject.
Yes, it is. And to your point, I remember when the lockdown lifted. I know many people who shed a single tear in the programming and online community. They shed a single tear because they realize that people are going to want to get out and they're not stuck to a computer screen. So there was that. But after a while, it calmed down and people returned to the computer screens, which was not necessarily a good thing. So I want to move on to a topic here. Financial freedom. What does financial freedom mean? I see that on a lot of ads. Financial freedom, and then you see some guy petting a dog with his daughter, presumably his daughter in the background. What does it look like? Is it different? Is it a fingerprint for people? How does that work?
It's absolutely different for everybody. What my financial freedom looked like, and what yours looks like, what anybody out there I've never seen two that look alike. Mm-hmm. So yeah, some of the ads out there will show some of those images, but it's not the same for everybody. Again, that's what comes back to those, for me, those personal relationships with clients. The more I understand who they are as a person, you get to know, do they have kids? Do they have 3 kids? Are they in university? As that grows and changes, you find out that a lot of times financial freedom is really the concept of not worrying about money. So whatever it is they want to do, that's what financial freedom typically is. But the specific imagery is completely different for everybody.
Yes, because it usually looks like some guy with a little bit of gray in his beard petting his dog with his grandkids or his kids running in a field with the sun overhead. And everybody who's listening to this broadcast has seen those posters, okay? All right. In terms of being successful with money, okay, a lot of people tend to believe that the common go-to things is, oh, my workplace has a little retirement fund, ignoring the effect of inflation. And a lot of people have gotten caught in that. Even family members of mine have gotten caught in the things that they know, inverted commas, right? So you have a retirement fund of some kind. Let's say your workplace has set it up for you. Okay, they set up your insurance, they set up your retirement fund. You are guaranteed, almost guaranteed, a certain amount of income at the end of a certain 33 and a third years, I believe it is. And then you come out and then you realize that a bear might cost you $20. And you had in your mind that I'm going to drink beer every day from 60 until the day I die, right?
Yeah.
Because I know that a beer costs $2. Explain it to people the things they need to be aware of when they're planning their retirement.
Yeah, there's typically two, and we'll call a caveat for a third. There's typically two large types of pensions, and they're going to be quite different. So there's what's called a defined benefit pension,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a defined contribution pension. So DC versus DB pension. So the defined benefit is they're guaranteed a certain income in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is considered, or was considered, to be the gold standard. And more as people of they're very, very expensive for the employers, and more people realize that they didn't keep up with inflation. So if when the person goes to retire, if you were making $80,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
your DB pension is, say, paying you $45,000 a year. So it's usually based on a percentage of your income. So yes, it's guaranteed you're going to keep getting that, but the problem with that is that income is going to stay like that for too long into the future, and inflation is going to eat away at that for sure. So when you retired, maybe that was 20 years ago, and you could still get beer at the university for 25 cents a glass. That was when I was going to university. Was you get 25-cent those flip cup beers, which was, you had too many of them. But now beer being a lot more expensive, and I think I went out with a client the other day, and one draft beer was $14. And if you want a nice import bottle beer out in public, you're that's what you're paying is $12, $14, $18 for a beer. So when you retired, it was very good because you had a decent amount of money, and you hopefully had your house paid off, you didn't have any debt, and so you could live on that fraction or smaller percentage of what you were making. The other pension that's out there is the defined contribution. That's where the employer gives you a set amount of money each paycheck. And typically those are more linked to market type investments, whereas the defined benefit is usually a lot of fixed term investments, so GICs and bonds and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if the employer is offering you something guaranteed, they have to be able to guarantee the investment. Now, the defined contribution pension, usually it's market linked. So there's some sort of investment in there, and typically 5 to 10 different investment options within a defined contribution pension. And those are going to allow the clients to work within their risk tolerance and whatnot. Those are going to be a lot more able to keep up with inflation, simply because they have that market linked aspect to them. So it's not going outside of a client's risk tolerance. It's staying within the risk tolerance, and that's good. Both pensions are going to be better than not having a pension at all, without a doubt, right? And most people are their own worst enemies. So having that forced savings works really well.
Mm-hmm.
The third option is going to be a group RSP. So a group RSP is going to be administered by a third party, and it's going to put them into usually mutual funds, sometimes into seg funds, which is on the life insurance side of the business. But a seg fund and a mutual fund are very similar in the fact that they're pooled investments. So you get into a Canadian bond fund, or you get into a Canadian balanced fund, or a Canadian equity fund, let's say. So they're going to give you the growth that you hopefully want without having more risk. And same thing. So very similar to a defined contribution pension is that employer's giving you set amount per paycheck, and off your paycheck, so much is coming out of there too. So at the end of the day, you get to retirement, and hopefully all three of those assets, you have a pot of money that's sitting there to work with.
Okay. So I want to take me through the process. I am a client. I come up to your office, not just to lay on your really cool and comfortable couch, right? But I come up to your office. I say, Yeorgo, here's $1,000. What happens after that?
So After the conversations where we establish that mutual language,
Mm-hmm.
very importantly, we have to talk about goals and objectives. What do you want that $1,000 to do to you? Are you going to be adding more money to that pot, or is this going to be a one-time investment? Regular investments is something that works really well for most people. They get paid on Friday. The money goes right into their RSP or into their tax-free savings account on the same day, so they don't notice the money missing. So the ability to invest more, that's a big part of the conversation. And then always is going to be risk tolerance and risk capacity. Those three things kind of work into the same thing. If you have $1,000, but you tell me that your timeline is super short, you want that $1,000 next week, you want it back,
Mm-hmm.
and you tell me you have high risk capacity, those two things don't mix. So to have a high risk tolerance, we also need to have a greater timeline than a week or a month or a year. So establishing those types of items are going to be the most critical thing with a client. And that's why a lot of times working with an advisor is going to be a lot better than someone trying to do it individually. So a lot of people will hop on their brokerage account online, and it's easy to do, transfer some money from my checking account into my brokerage account. I'll go buy some shares of NVIDIA because I heard NVIDIA is really good with AI and I want to, put some money in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, the client's not taking their own well-being necessarily into mine. Doesn't mean that that every client isn't, but if most people don't have that eye on the future and aren't answering those own questions for themselves, it's too emotional. I'm excited to put that $1,000 into NVIDIA, and maybe that's going to be worth $3,000 in a year's time because NVIDIA's had 1,000% growth, right? So I want that to keep growing and growing and growing. Everyone again is different. So client comes in here, establish mutual language, then we start talking goals and objectives, risk tolerances, risk capacity, timelines, and then whether they're investing one time, investing all the time, occasional lump sums, things like that.
Understood. I suppose my next question is for the young investors. Little Sally has a lemonade stand. She comes to your office. Okay. She's like, I made $5. I want to invest like $2. What is the ceiling and what is the the floor when it comes to investment? Obviously, you're a very serious person. You do finance, but what is the ceiling and what is the floor? What does a typical investment look like in terms of the ceiling and the floor?
Beautiful question. The floor is a little bit to do with age. So if we talk about lemonade stand, what was her name? Sorry,
Sally.
Sally. So Sally can invest herself if she's under the age of 18.
Okay.
So Sally would need her parents to invest the money on her behalf. And it could still be have Sally's name with the investment. So it'd usually be mom and dad in trust for Sally. So it's an informal trust. There's no money to set up the trust. So it still can be done. The floor is going to be different for every advisor and everybody in different firms. For me, I look at it as a foundational relationship. So if Sally wants to come and meet with me, I don't care if she's 8 years old or if she's 12 years old, she's going to be there with her parents regardless at that age. But let's start having those conversations. And for me, the time I'm investing in her is going to pay dividends in her life. So as she realizes maybe today it's only $50, but maybe when she looks at that when she's 21, maybe that's $650. Maybe it's $450, right? But she now gets to see compound growth at work. And so the quicker, I said this earlier, the quicker I get this client, so even if they're young, so sometimes I've met with clients, met with their teenagers. I think probably 12 is the youngest I've ever met with someone. But my daughter, who's now 13, her and I started having these conversations when she was 3. And so importantly, I loved having my daughter as a sounding board, because if I could explain to her what was going on, then I was pretty sure I could explain it to an adult, right?
Yeah.
And so that's coming back to that question you asked a while back, about explaining it in terms they can understand. But the next thing, because a lot of times clients are intimidated to have these conversations. So they think that, they're going to be given, I can sell probably 60,000 different investments within Canada. So they think that I'm just going to leave them to the wolves and they have to pick.
Mm-hmm.
So big part of that conversation and those conversations, and if it's with Sally, it's the same thing. It's asking her the same questions. Obviously, in that case, I'm looking for at the parents for some feedback and agreement. But it's then placing a very finite number of investment opportunities in front of that client, and they get to pick. Because at the end of the day, I can't tell you what to do. If I do, that relationship is doomed to fail. Whereas if I give you a smaller selection of investments and give you all of the available information to select from that pool, 3, 4 investments, sometimes 2, and you take onus on that and you make that decision yourself, and Sally would be just as important to make that decision herself, she gets to understand, that you as the client gets to understand that now what I do matters. It's not just Yeorgo or just Joe Advisor that's telling me what to do and they're, doing everything for me. The more you have skin in the game,
Mm-hmm.
the more you're aware of what's happening. You're going to ask me better questions. You're going to ask, or you're going to give me better feedback.
Yeah. You see, your daughter is particularly fortunate to have a dad like you who speaks to her about these things. A lot of people were not that fortunate, right? A lot of people may have had parents who are into trades, as an example, who may not know the ins and outs of the fineries of finance. So, there are a lot of people who I meet who are middle aged and older who wish they could do life over, do a do over, and make different decisions. What do you say to the people who probably did not have all those pieces of information that you just said? Right? Is it too late to invest? When is it too late? Is there ever a time when it's too late? And to, how should I say, take control of your financial um, matters and your life?
I don't believe it's ever too late.
Hmm.
If we go back to what you were talking about, what financial freedom looked like, and I said it's when you don't really worry about money
Hmm.
and you can just live your life. So absolutely, it's a little bit of a Saskatchewan thing, but it's also a human nature. Lots of times people don't think about retirement until about 5 years before they retire.
Hmm.
Very often they don't do any financial planning until they've already retired. It's very, very common. So I've had someone come to me who's 65 years old and say, this is my situation, can you help me? And she was willing to work a couple more years. We had to catch her up in a lot of ways, not just dollars and cents, but also this knowledge that you need to be comfortable in making some of these decisions. If someone's retired, somebody else out there who's a good planner like myself is going to say, that they waited too long. It's not the case. As long as they have a source of income. I've even taken on clients that have no source of income other than CPP, old age security, that type of stuff.
Hmm.
We need income to last for our lives. We live in a society that runs on money. We don't live on a society that runs on smiles and handshakes, right? So we can take on clients at any age, at any situation. At that point, I'm going to be probably more honest than with somebody who's 21 years old, right? The 21-year-old, we have a lot of time to grow and make mistakes and move back and forth and make different decisions, change careers, do all those things. That person who's 60 plus or even 55 plus, they have less ability to make mistakes. So going to an advisor rather than trying to fumble through it and do it themselves is the better avenue for sure. And there's not too late, but it gets more serious the longer someone waits.
Understood. That makes sense. That makes absolute sense. And you're right. Not everybody is a planner, and not everybody. A lot of people that I meet, I mean, I speak to people on a daily. They get caught into debt traps, as an example, and they don't necessarily have a plan. So there is that. I suppose my final question in this interview is, what is your overall advice for the average person who's watching this? Why it is that financial practice, financial planning is important to their lives?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what I've said a couple of times is the more knowledge you possess about any subject, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. So seeking out professional advice that works for you, the individual, is important. So I know that I can't help everybody out there, but I appreciate these opportunities, and why I think I've started doing more social media is if someone doesn't have anybody out there, they still need good advice. And absolutely, from this side of the desk, this is my business, so I do make money doing it, but I try my best to be that independent advice. So I do offer a service where I'm giving, I'll look at anything that someone's doing, and not to steal the business, but if you want a second set of eyes on it, somebody who has professional eyes, I don't even charge for that. It's just a matter of, you need to have someone who's in your corner. And I know, so 26 years I've been in this industry, 24 years as a full-time advisor, and a lot of different things. What I learned over that time period is I cannot work with every client. Just because someone walks into my door doesn't mean I can, should, or will take them on as a client. Just like that, everyone that walks through that door maybe doesn't want to work with me. Personalities have to mesh, and that communication has to mesh. So I always say the most important thing I need from a client is two-way feedback. I can't help you, I can't make adjustments to your portfolio or your investments if you don't tell me what it is that you like or don't like. So people need to get to an advisor. Doesn't have to be me. They need to get to an advisor, and it has to be a good mix of personality, and you have to be able to communicate.
Excellent. Excellent, Yeorgo. Yeorgo, give these people a way to get in touch with you. I have the trailer going there, but give them your every contact you can give them so that they can actually get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have my email address, and it looks like my Instagram on the bottom there. My Instagram would also take you to my Facebook page, but if you're on Facebook and you just search DNY Financial, that'll take you to me. My office number is 306-206-1820. My mobile, so if someone wants to text or call, is 306-591-6223. I do have a toll-free number, but right off the top of my head, I actually can't remember it.
It's okay. We can include it in the caption when we're posting this to social media. I will absolutely include these details. Listen, guys, this has been Yeorgo Traiforos, and he is a financial advisor. There are not a lot of these guys who are out here actually functionally helping the public on social media. I know that in this province, I have failed to see anyone out there who's actively helping people in the way that he is. So hit him up on his Instagram at DNY Financial, or his Facebook, and I will include all of his information in the captions beneath this post. So guys, and if you can't get through, contact me and I'll put you in contact with Yeorgo. Okay, guys, you can find me at info@onexxa.com. Okay, Yeorgo, anything else?
I appreciate the opportunity, David. This is an amazing opportunity. I've enjoyed our conversation today. I've enjoyed our past conversations. So I look forward to helping anybody. And if you want to do this again sometime, free advice, right? We're given people. I'd be happy to do it for you.
Excellent. All right, guys, see you in the next video.
Hi, everybody. This is Amy Kruzik. I am a certified hypnotherapist from the International Association of Counselors in Therapy and the Professional Board of Hypnotherapy here in Canada. I am here to announce the opening of our new Unified Health Systems online store, where you will find professional courses and done-for-you products at reasonable prices in the market. Check them out at shop.unifiedhealthsystems.com. Bye, everybody. See you there.